Hey everyone, welcome to Dirk Island. My name's Michael Durkheimer.
I'm Alec Durkheimer, and this is the weekend show where we talk about weird and fascinating things going on in the world.
Usually through watching documentaries. On this episode, we're talking about a new documentary that we watched on Amazon Prime called Lorena, and it's about the story of Lorena Bobbitt. It's actually, I think, executive produced by Jordan Peele, and it's just the craziest story about, obviously, you know, a wife who cuts off her husband's penis, but there is just so much more to the story. And the real theme that we explore in this episode is karma true? And I think this makes a pretty good case that it is. So we really enjoyed it. Hope you enjoy too. Talking about Lorena, which is the documentary on Amazon Prime right now, 4-parter about the infamous story of Lorena Bobbitt and John Bobbitt, which that's probably enough for anyone who's in the United States in the 1990s to know what that's about. But that is the wife who cut off her husband's penis while he slept. And it was like the biggest meme of the 90s. As far, I think it was the 90s, right? Like, it was like the biggest thing ever. It was like, I feel like it was everywhere. And we were just kids at the time when that was like a story. I don't know. Do you remember?
I don't remember. I
you were like too young to
no,
remember it?
Yeah.
Okay, so did you know about it before watching it?
I've heard of a woman cutting off a man's penis before.
Yes.
Somewhere, sometime. Knew basically no details about it.
So
it's
yeah,
like an old wives' tale.
Me neither is really the truth as the facts, because it's one of those things a bit like
hot coffee.
A bit like hot coffee.
Yeah.
Yes, you were okay. That's fucking hilarious that you said that. It's a bit like hot coffee, where the meme of what it's about eclipsed any facts about the story, and that's actually a great documentary on hot coffee, which we gotta go do also. But we'll just leave it for that. But the reason that I'm sure we're both thinking the same thing on hot coffee is, you thought you had an idea of what it was. A woman who just cuts off her husband's dick, and it's like, oh my God, can you believe it? And everyone's like, oh no. Like, it's just like ridiculous. But we know,
like crazy her,
you know,
for cutting
zero,
off the penis.
you know, zero facts. Just like with the hot coffee story, everyone's like, someone sued McDonald's because they were stupid enough to get a coffee and spill it on themselves, then it hurt because it burned because it's hot coffee, and then they fucking sue. So we need to stop people able to sue so much.
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, that's the story you know. That's the story everyone knows, and you don't fucking know the story. So that's the Lorena story too, which is why it's very good to watch, obviously, right? And anyway, I mean, to cut it short, the story is that she did it because he was basically a serial abuser and rapist of her. And she was like trapped in this marriage as like a prisoner almost to him. And he would get drunk, and he would just, these are all her allegations of the scenario, but she was such an abuse victim that she just did this to him in the middle of the night one time, and then fled, and then they were apart. But he told her basically, if you ever try to leave me, you won't go far, or I'll kill you, or just like, that's what she says. Like, it's the most incredible story of abuse, of a like spousal abuse that you could possibly imagine. And I can't believe that was just left out. Like, totally. Obviously the act is so the joke, so sensational that everyone forgot about any of the details. And people are just like, well, I mean, even you see people all the time, even if what she's saying about like him doing it, she didn't have to go do that. She could have just walked out. You know, I mean, what's your reaction after seeing it, knowing the story? I mean, what'd you feel about the documentary?
I mean, it added so much texture, and it is interesting how, and a little insensitive, how culturally, like, what a crazy story, she cuts his penis off, and everyone has a laugh about it, and like, wow, you know, better not, you know, did he cheat on her? Better not do that, or your wife will really get revenge on you. Meanwhile, there's like all this texture to the fact that he beat her like a lot and she felt completely trapped, and I think she got citizenship maybe through the marriage, didn't she?
I don't know.
And she had this American dream about coming to America and then gets married to him, and it's this nightmare scenario, and gives you all this context about how domestic violence can work and how difficult and scary it is. And in fact, what's really interesting, or just also eye-opening, is that the most dangerous time for women who are beaten is when they're trying to leave. So it's like exactly what you'd think. It's like, oh, well, why don't they just leave? It's like, well, statistically, it's because people get murdered that way by their violent husbands, like trying to leave and then, in a lot of cases, have no idea how to find a safe place for themselves and not end up in an even worse condition and need complete protection. And
Yes.
It's very hard to reach out for help. It just educates you on, like, it makes a ton of sense why they don't leave, and you start to learn how to get into the head. And for me, it's like, if you fully saw a man just like beating up on his totally vulnerable, like smaller than him wife day after day, you're like, this guy deserves to just get taken out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, losing his dick and getting it sewn on back on is like pretty lucky circumstance if you know all that detail. But it's just funny, the insensitivity of the way the news story is told and how she's portrayed, and then this just gives so much more context to it. Allegedly, assuming everything, he's in the documentary featured, and
So is she.
And so is she. So they're both in it, and he's talking straightforward. But yeah, just like a really interesting flip from what the news story was back in the 90s to how much more information they find, but just like putting in the effort to make a documentary.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. There are two things that I would say stuck out for me about this. One of them is it's a really good peer into this idea that we sometimes forget, that physical abuse usually accompanies a mental abuse, and mental abuse can often mean that the person who is abused doesn't think in the way that you would think is rational. Like, leaving is good. Like you're explaining, yeah, like she could, rationally speaking, his like threats or her fear could be like she actually would get murdered, right? Because that happens. That just happens. Like, people fucking murder their spouses. The other thing is that you don't think rationally if you're being abused.
Mm-hmm.
You don't think rationally. So that's just another component of it. So just to remember that these people are not going to all of a sudden be abused physically, mentally, and then make a really great rational decision often, because that's usually deprived as part of the abuse. That's usually taken away. It's all part of the same game, right? So just another one of those assumptions that you got to just let go, because you're not thinking the way that people, correctly. The other piece is that I just couldn't believe how ridiculous he was. I mean, he's in the documentary, but it doesn't paint him too well. And there is a time where he, especially, and I think towards the end, where he is, they talk about his days as, I think, like a bouncer at there's some sort of basically brothel outside of Las Vegas. I forget what the name of it's called. Do you remember?
Mm-mm.
It's called like it's not the Bunny Ranch, that's like Playboy, but it's like anyway, it's a very famous brothel outside of Las Vegas who basically hired John Bobbitt, because the name was like super popular, to be like a bouncer at the brothel. So like he'd like meet you at the door when you came in. Maybe they tried to have him serve you drinks while you were waiting, and he like was so incompetent he couldn't even serve a drink. It's like the guy. This is part of the documentary, but it's not painted very redeemingly.
Yeah, his character is revealed.
Yeah, a lot of other allegations of abuse afterwards, which make whose story is correct, definitely stacked against him. Plus, having no one who seems to speak for him. Like, no one who ever had any prolonged interactions with this guy thought anything well of him. Thought he cheated them, thought he was a drunk, thought he abused people, thought he was just a terror in their life and a terrible person. It's fascinating. Because, this guy was famous. Famous for a crazy thing. Famous for having his dick cut off and then it being sewn back on. But,
and then had the good intellect to go in a bunch of porns and then decided to get reconstructive surgery to try to make his penis even longer. I mean, because it's a complete godsend that this surgeon was able to reattach it, and he
in working order
to the point that he could be in porns in the first place. And then he goes and gets surgery to make it bigger so he can make some stupid porn that he's not smart enough to make a deal where he makes any money off of them anyway. Just is in a porn and the producers make all the money. He's not even getting rich off of them, and he's dumb enough to go do this other surgery, and lo and behold, the surgeon totally didn't tell him accurate information about how safe it was to do it and really fucked it up, and he regretted doing that. Because what kind of person would have some surgeon work a miracle on you and you're completely blessed to have a working penis in the first place, and then you're like, you know what, let me just roll the dice just to make it look longer so I can be in some stupid ass porno and fuck it up. You really are a grateful person who counts your blessings and is grounded.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that is the
it just reveals his character.
a semi-ironic way to look at this film. I mean, it's compelling. It's a bit fun. It's a bit traumatizing. It's certainly about domestic abuse and violence, and so that's a super heavy topic. But I think that from the hot coffee angle that we were talking, the fact that you can just not know a news story. You can even hear a news story and have your initial thing and then just have it completely dismantled over time. Excellent in that way, this one.
Yeah.
And just really compelling. I mean, just one of those tabloidy stories from the 90s. I mean, not super important ground. Domestic violence as a portrait of that, yes. But as far as a tabloid story from the 90s, which many documentaries are about, Three Identical Strangers, all this other, hard to make it, really important that way. But I think the thing that is so rewarding about watching this documentary, I would say, and why I would recommend it, or at least why I enjoyed it, is because I could say there's a little bit of an ironic conclusion I could say, but it's basically that karma is true. And not that this is a real belief of mine, but karma is true really does feel true when you watch this for the two things that we're talking about. One is that the guy gets his dick cut off, and by a medical miracle, and the fact that she didn't want to put it in the disposal, and she didn't want to do it. She actually did it. She took it with her, and she was out of her mind, threw it into a field, and actually told the police right after where she threw it so they could get it, put it on ice, and reattach it. And through a medical miracle, he gets this back. And you know that it's almost in a way, knowing all the facts of it, you feel I wish she had not actually told him where it was, because that guy, he could have had a harsher punishment because he got off, right? He got off. So you're karma is not true. And he got his stick back. Karma is so not true. And she almost went to jail for a long time for doing this. He got nothing for the domestic abuse. And you're this is so fucked. But the karma is true, is that the guy who had all that went and got the shitty surgeon to elongate his fucking penis and ruined it. And it's a very strange justice that is oh, no, don't worry. He will fuck this up somehow. somehow people who, even if they keep getting lucky when they shouldn't, will be their own worst nightmare. Will self-destruct eventually. Same thing happens with him on a legal front later. But, I mean, he says, it's not Lorena that I really hold it against. It's my second wife who really fucked me. Another woman who says he terrorized her and abused the shit out of her and did horrible things. And in that one, he actually did get some legal justice against him. And now, no, but it's all her fault. And it's like, okay.
Yeah.
You didn't get away with enough. You kept rolling the dice until your life was completely fucked.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. It's a bit of a one-sided documentary, even though it does present both sides. But yeah, karma is true, and the most I don't know. It was quite a funny story to watch in that way. It was just beyond belief in that respect. Anyway.
Yeah, no, that's a great aspect, and then the fact that they made it all these years later. I mean, he really does. In case there was any ambiguity from just the original Lorena story, he really lays it out for you why he is actually the piece of shit in this story and the liar, which is pretty great. Yeah.
Or he doesn't have to. He just denies things pretty poorly in a way that's not credible ever. But he doesn't even realize how bad of a liar he is. I mean, I don't know. I have an opinion, but yeah, he doesn't. He doesn't seem to. He's not very credible, and he doesn't seem to even realize that he's not very credible. And everyone who's ever seemed to have any relationship with him just doesn't say nice things. So anyway, yeah, I mean,
interesting.
A worthy documentary. Okay, anything else?
No.
Okay.
I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, and I think this one.
Jordan Peele.
Yeah, isn't this a Jordan Peele? Executive.
I was like, okay, Jordan Peele. I'll watch anything he does, but it's interesting.
Yeah, what choices? What choices?
Yeah.
Thank you for that. It's a good one to have been helped be birthed into this world.
I know.
It was interesting. Okay, a short explanation of that one.
Yeah.
Next time.